Jake Morrison pushed his old cargo ship through the asteroid field like a man running from death itself. The engines screamed in protest as he forced them beyond their safety limits. Behind him, 3 sleek alien ships with spotted hulls closed in fast, their weapons charged with deadly blue light, the warning signals on. Jake's control panel flashed red and yellow like an angry Christmas tree. He ignored them all. His ship, the Wandering Star, bucked and rolled as he threw it around massive floating rocks that could crush him in seconds. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits. The smell of burning metal filled the air. Jake grinned as he pulled his ship into a sharp turn that would have killed most pilots. The artificial gravity failed for a moment, and he felt his stomach drop. But he had been flying dangerous runs for 20 years. A little zero gravity never scared him. The aliens chasing him were called the HFY. They looked like giant leopards that walked on 2 legs and wore fancy uniforms. Their fur was covered in dark spots, and their eyes glowed yellow in the dark. They were known throughout the galaxy as the best hunters and law enforcers. They never gave up once they started chasing someone. Commander Veltar led the chase from his command ship. His claws gripped the armrests of his chair as he watched the crazy human pilot dance through the asteroid field. In all his years of service, he had never seen anyone fly so recklessly. The humans seemed to have no fear of death at all. "Sir, should we use the ion cannons?" asked his second officer, a younger HFY named Zixara. Her spotted tail twitched with excitement. She had never seen a chase like this before. "No," Veltar said through gritted teeth. "We need him alive." "But target his engines. One good shot should stop this madness." Jake saw the energy build up on his rear scanners. The aliens were getting ready to shoot. He had maybe 10 seconds before they fired. Time to get creative. He spotted a cluster of small asteroids ahead. They were spinning slowly in space, creating a narrow gap between them. The gap was barely wide enough for his ship. If he miscalculated by even a meter, he would be crushed. "Come on, baby," Jake whispered to his ship. "One more crazy stunt." He dove toward the gap at full speed. The asteroid wall scraped against his hull with a sound like nails on metal. Warning alarms screamed. His ship shook so hard his teeth rattled. But he made it through. The HFY ships were too big to follow. They had to go around the cluster, which gave Jake a few precious seconds, but his luck was running out. The engines were overheating badly. He could smell something burning that definitely should not be burning. "Human vessel, this is Commander Veltar of the HFY Patrol Fleet," came a voice over the radio. The alien's English was perfect, but his accent made every word sound like a threat. "Stop your ship immediately, or we will be forced to disable you." Jake grabbed the radio microphone. "Sorry, Commander Kitty Cat, but I've got places to be. Maybe next time." He could almost hear Veltar's growl of anger through the radio static. HFY did not like being compared to Earth cats. They considered it insulting. The chase continued for another 10 minutes. Jake's ship was falling apart around him. The engine temperature was deep in the red zone. His navigation computer had given up and was just showing error messages. The hull was making creaking sounds that meant structural failure was coming soon. But Jake kept flying. He had a job to do, and he was not going to let some alien leopards stop him. The cargo in his hold was medical supplies for the outer colonies. People were dying out there while he played tag with the space police. The end came when Jake tried one last desperate maneuver. He attempted to slingshot around a large asteroid using its gravity to gain speed, but his engines finally gave up. A cascade failure sent power surging through systems that were never meant to handle it. Veltar's gunner took the shot. A precise energy beam struck the Wandering Star's engine compartment. The ship lurched and went dead in space. Emergency power kept the life support running, but everything else was offline. Jake sat in his pilot's chair and listened to the silence. No more engine noise, no more warning alarms. Just the quiet hum of the air recycler and the distant sound of the HFY ships moving closer. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a simple communicator, but it was much more than that. Jake pressed a hidden button and spoke quietly into it. "Package delivered. The fish are in the net. Beginning phase 2? Then he put the device away and put his hands behind his head. He was still grinning when the Kethver boarding party cut through his airlock. Commander. Veltar was the first alien through the door. He was tall and muscular, with golden fur marked by dark spots. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and his boots shined like mirrors. He moved with the fluid grace of a natural predator. "Human Jake Morrison," Veltar announced in his precise, clipped voice. "You are under arrest for reckless piloting, endangering traffic lanes, and resisting lawful detention." Jake looked up at the alien commander with innocent eyes. "Well, boys, looks like you caught me. Hope you're ready for what comes next." Something about the human's tone made Veltar's fur stand on end. Criminals usually begged for mercy or tried to run when they were caught. They did not smile like they had just won a prize. They did not speak like they were in control of the situation. "Search the ship," Veltar ordered his team. "Find out what he was really carrying." While the Kethver searched the cargo hold, Jake sat quietly in his chair. He hummed an old Earth song under his breath and watched the aliens work. They were very thorough, checking every container and scanning every inch of the ship. They found exactly what Jake wanted them to find: medical supplies, food packets, and basic tools. Nothing illegal. Nothing that would explain why he had been flying so recklessly through a restricted zone. "Sir," one of the search team reported, "it's all legitimate cargo. Medical supplies bound for the frontier colonies. The manifests are all in order." Veltar's yellow eyes narrowed. "Then why run? Why risk your life for a routine cargo delivery?" Jake just smiled wider. "Maybe I don't like being told what to do. Maybe I'm just a guy who values his freedom more than his safety." The alien commander studied the human for a long moment. Something was not right here. In his experience, cargo haulers were practical people who avoided trouble. They did not run from the law unless they had something to hide. "Take him to the holding cells on Nexus 7, Veltar finally ordered. "Full background check. I want to know everything about this human." As the Kethver guards led Jake away, he caught Veltar's eye one more time. "You know, Commander, they say curiosity killed the cat. But they never mention what happened to the cat who was smart enough to ask the right questions." Veltar watched the human disappear down the corridor. His predatory instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. Jake Morrison was not what he appeared to be. The question was, what was he really? The commander decided he was going to find out, even if he regretted it later. After all, he was Kethver. They were hunters by nature. And Jake Morrison was the most interesting prey he had encountered in years. Little did Veltar know that he had just walked into the most dangerous trap of his career, and the bait had been perfectly set by a human who was supposed to be dead. The holding cells on Nexus 7 were built to contain the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy. The walls were made of reinforced metal that could stop a plasma cannon. The energy barriers could hold back creatures with the strength of 10 men. Electronic systems monitored every breath and heartbeat of the prisoners inside. Jake Morrison sat on the metal bench in his cell, reading a book he had pulled from his jacket pocket. The title was Advanced Starship Engineering, and it looked well worn from years of use. He hummed a cheerful tune from old Earth as he turned the pages. Other prisoners in nearby cells stared at him with confusion and fear. Most people who ended up in these cells spent their time pacing back and forth like caged animals. They screamed at the guards. They banged on the walls. They begged to be released. Jake Morrison acted like he was sitting in his favorite chair at home. Officer Zixara had been assigned to process Jake's background check. She was young for a Kethver, barely past her 20th year. Her golden fur was still bright, not yet dulled by years of police work. She took pride in her job and always followed procedures exactly. Zixara connected to the Galactic database and entered Jake's name. The screen flashed as it searched through trillions of records from hundreds of worlds. She expected to find the usual information about a cargo pilot, maybe some traffic violations, perhaps a few unpaid fines. What she found made her spotted. First, stand straight up. Jake Morrison was not just any cargo hauler. He was Admiral Jake Morrison, former commander of the Terran Defense Force. The database showed a long list of medals and honors. Hero of the Battle of Centauri Prime, defender of the Outer Rim, the man who had saved the colony ship New Hope from pirate attack, but the most shocking entry was at the bottom of the file. According to official records, Admiral Jake Morrison had been declared dead 3 years ago. His ship had been destroyed during a classified mission in the Void Zone. The entire human military had mourned his death. There had been parades in his honor on Earth. Zixara's claws shook as she read. More. Jake Morrison was famous throughout human space. Military academies taught courses about his tactics. Young officers studied his battles to learn how to win against impossible odds. He was the kind of leader that soldiers would follow into the fires of hell itself. The young Kethver officer read about the siege of Vega Prime. Jake had been trapped on a space station with only 50 Marines. 10,000 enemy soldiers surrounded them. Everyone expected him to surrender. Instead, Jake had held out for 6 hours using clever tricks and desperate courage. He had given the civilian transports time to escape. Then there was the incident at the Zirathi weapon platform. An ancient artificial intelligence had taken control of a weapon that could destroy entire star systems. Jake had fought his way through the platform's defenses and shut it down. The explosion had supposedly killed him, but it had also saved billions of lives. Zixara's tail twitched with nervous energy. If Jake Morrison was really dead, then who was sitting in their holding cell? If he was alive, why was he hauling cargo instead of commanding fleets? And most importantly, what was he doing in Kethver space? She printed out the file and ran to find Commander Veltar. The older Kethver was in his office, reviewing patrol reports. When Zixara burst through his door without knocking, his ears flattened against his head in annoyance. Officer Zixara, what is the meaning of this interruption? Sir, you need to see this, she said, dropping the file on his desk. The human we arrested, he's not who we thought he was. Veltar picked up the file and began reading. His expression changed from annoyance to surprise to deep concern. When he finished, he looked up at his young officer with troubled eyes. This cannot be correct. Jake Morrison is dead. I attended the memorial service myself. The human ambassador spoke about his sacrifice. Sir, I ran the biometric scan twice. Fingerprints, DNA, retinal patterns, they all match. That human in our cell is definitely Jake Morrison. Veltar stood up and walked to his window. Outside he could see the vast emptiness of space. Stars twinkled like distant diamonds. Somewhere out there, the human homeworld of Earth turned in its orbit, unaware that one of its greatest heroes was sitting in a Kethver jail cell. Get me a secure connection to Galactic Command, Veltar ordered. If Jake Morrison is alive, there will be people who want to know about it. While Zixara worked on the communication link, Veltar thought about the implications. Dead heroes did not just show up hauling medical supplies. They especially did not smile when they were arrested. Something very important was happening, and he was starting to suspect that the Kethver patrol had walked into the middle of it. The connection to Galactic Command took 20 minutes to establish. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Chun, a human officer who served as liaison between Earth and the other species. His eyes widened when he saw the file Veltar transmitted. Commander Veltar, are you certain this is accurate? We have run every test possible, Admiral. The human in our custody is definitely Jake Morrison. Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment. Commander, I need you to understand something. Jake Morrison's death was classified at the highest levels. If he is alive, then his current mission is also classified. You may have just arrested one of the most important people in human space. What should we do? Keep him secure, but treat him well. I'm sending a team to collect him. They will arrive in 18 hours. Until then, tell no one about this. Not even your own officers. The connection ended, leaving Veltar alone with his thoughts. He had been a police officer for 30 years. He had learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were telling him that Jake Morrison had wanted to be arrested. The question was, why? Meanwhile, in the holding cell, Jake Morrison finished his book and pulled out another one. This one was titled Quantum Physics for Beginners, and it was even more worn than the first. A guard walked by and stared at the strange human who read science books in jail. "Hey, guard," Jake called out cheerfully. "You wouldn't happen to have any coffee, would you? I'm not picky about the brand." The HFY guard looked at him suspiciously. "Prisoners get water and nutrition bars. Nothing else." "Fair enough," Jake said with a shrug. "How about a tour of the station?" "I've always been curious about HFY architecture." The guard's ears flattened. "You will remain in your cell until processing is complete." "Worth a try," Jake said, returning to his book. "Say, you wouldn't happen to know if this station has any research levels, would you?" "I'm particularly interested in basement levels. You know, the kind that don't appear on public maps." The guard's tail went rigid. He hurried away without answering. Jake smiled to himself and made a mental note. The guard's reaction had told him exactly what he needed to know. Nexus 7 definitely had secrets hidden in its lower levels. 3 hours later, Commander Veltar decided to question the prisoner himself. He walked down to the holding cells, his boots clicking on the metal floor. Other prisoners cowered as he passed. Jake Morrison looked up from his book and smiled. "Commander, good to see you again. I was starting to think you had forgotten about." May, Veltar studied the human carefully. Jake Morrison looked older than his pictures, with gray streaks in his brown hair and lines around his eyes. But those eyes were sharp and intelligent. They held secrets that Veltar wanted to understand. "Mr. Morrison, we need to talk." "I thought you might say that." "Should I put my book away, or can I finish this chapter?" "It's about quantum entanglement, and it's just getting to the good part." Veltar's patience was wearing thin. "You will come with me now." Jake closed his book and stood up. "Lead the way, Commander. I'm curious to see what questions you have for a simple cargo pilot." As they walked toward the interrogation room, Veltar noticed something troubling. Jake Morrison walked with the confident stride of a military officer. His eyes constantly scanned the corridors, noting guard positions and security cameras. This was not the behavior of a frightened prisoner. This was the behavior of a man who was exactly where he wanted to be. The interrogation room on Nexus 7 was designed to make prisoners feel small and helpless. The walls were painted a cold gray color. A single bright light hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows. The metal table was bolted to the floor, and the chairs were uncomfortable by design. Jake Morrison sat across from Commander Veltar, looking like he was having the time of his life. He had folded his hands on the table and was smiling the same friendly smile he had worn since his arrest. The bright light that was supposed to blind him seemed to bother him not at all. "Commander." Veltar opened a thick file and spread several photographs across the table. They showed Jake in his military uniform standing on the bridge of a warship. In another photo, he was shaking hands with the President of Earth. A third showed him receiving a medal for bravery. "Admiral Morrison," Veltar began, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "you are supposed to be dead." Jake picked up one of the photographs and studied it with interest. "You know, that's a terrible picture of me. I look like I haven't slept in a week." "Which, come to think of it, I probably hadn't." "Answer the question. Why are you alive when official records say you died 3 years ago?" Jake set the photograph down and leaned back in his chair. "Well, Commander, that's the beauty of being dead. Amazing how much easier it is to get things done when people think you're not around anymore. No reporters asking stupid questions. No politicians wanting photo opportunities. No admirals giving me orders I don't want to follow." Veltar's tail twitched with frustration. "What are you doing here? What is your real purpose on this station?" For the first time since his arrest, Jake's expression grew serious. The friendly smile faded from his face, replaced by the hard look of a man who had seen too much war. "Tell me something, Commander. What do you know about the research facility on this station? The one that's buried 5 levels below where we're sitting right now?" The blood drained from Veltar's spotted features. The research facility was one of the most closely guarded secrets in the galaxy. Only a handful of people knew it existed, and Jake Morrison should not be one of them. "I don't know what you're talking about," Veltar said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Project Pandora, Jake continued, as if the Kethver commander had not spoken. Your people working with the Galactic Council to reverse engineer Zirathi technology, trying to build weapons that could wipe out entire planets with the push of a button. Veltar's claws extended without his conscious control. That research is classified beyond top secret. How could you possibly know about it? Because I'm very good at my job, Commander. And my job, for the past 3 years, has been keeping track of weapons that could destroy Earth. The research is for defensive purposes only, Veltar said, though he was beginning to doubt his own words. The galaxy needs protection from threats like the Zirathi. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. The Zirathi are gone, Commander. I made sure of that when I supposedly died. But the research continues. And now I've learned that someone plans to use those weapons. Not against alien threats, but against my homeworld. The revelation hit Veltar like a physical blow. That's impossible. The Galactic Council would never authorize an attack on Earth. The Galactic Council doesn't know about this, Jake said quietly. This is a shadow operation. A group of extremists who believe that humanity is too dangerous to be left alone. They think we're going to conquer the galaxy and enslave everyone else? Veltar stared at the human across the table. You have no proof of this. Jake reached into his jacket and pulled out a small datapad. He slid it across the table to Veltar. Take a look for yourself. The Kethver commander picked up the device and began reading. What he saw made his fur stand on end. Communication intercepts between higher-ranking officials. Financial records showing massive secret funding. Technical specifications for weapons that could sterilize an entire planet. This is ... Veltar began, then stopped. He could not find words for what he was seeing. Genocide, Jake finished for him. They're planning to commit genocide against my species, and they're going to use your research to do it. Veltar continued reading. The evidence was overwhelming. A conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the galactic government. Politicians and military officers who had decided that humanity was too dangerous to survive. They planned to make it look like a Zirathi attack, Jake continued. Some kind of automated weapon that survived the war. Earth gets destroyed, humanity is scattered and broken, and the galaxy becomes a safer place for everyone else. But why come here? Why get yourself arrested? Jake's smile returned, but now it was the smile of a predator. Because this is where they built the weapon. 5 levels down in a facility that officially doesn't exist. And now that I'm here, I'm going to make sure it never gets used. Veltar set down the datapad with shaking hands. You're talking about destroying a Galactic Council research facility. That would be an act of war. Only if anyone finds out about it, Jake said. And that's where you come in, Commander. What do you mean? You're an honorable being, Veltar. I've read your service record. You've spent your whole career protecting innocent people from criminals and terrorists. Are you going to let those same criminals commit genocide just because they wear fancy uniforms? The Cathar commander was quiet for a long moment. Outside the interrogation room, the station continued its normal operations. Scientists worked. On their research, security guards walked their patrols. None of them knew that a conspiracy was unfolding around them. What do you want from me? Veltar finally asked. Access to the research facility. I need to see exactly what they've built down there. And I need someone I can trust to help me stop them. This is madness. Even if what you say is true, we're talking about going up against the most powerful people in the galaxy. Jake leaned forward. Commander, 3 years ago I was trapped on a space station with 50 Marines. 10,000 enemy soldiers surrounded us. Everyone told me to surrender. Instead, I held them off for 6 hours and saved 2 million civilians. Do you know how I did it? How? I stopped thinking about how powerful the enemy was and started thinking about how much I had to lose if I failed. Those civilians weren't just numbers on a report. They were people with families and dreams and futures, just like the 8 billion people on Earth who are going to die if we don't stop this. Veltar looked at the photographs spread across the table. Jake Morrison in his dress uniform, receiving medals for bravery. Jake Morrison standing with other heroes at a memorial service. Jake Morrison leading troops into battle against impossible odds. You really think we can stop them? Commander, I've spent my whole life fighting battles that couldn't be won, and I'm still here. The question is, are you going to help me, or are you going to let fear make your decisions for you? Veltar stood up and walked to the small window in the interrogation room. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a blue-green world full of humans, who had no idea that their destruction was being planned in a secret facility beneath their feet. If we do this, Veltar said slowly, there's no going back. Once we enter that facility, we'll be committed to whatever happens next. Jake stood up as well. Commander, I've been committed to this since the moment I learned about the conspiracy. The only question is whether I'm going to face it alone or with help. Veltar turned away from the window and looked at the human who was supposed to be dead. Jake Morrison stood straight and tall, despite the prison clothes and the chains around his wrists. He looked like what he was, a soldier who had never learned how to quit. What do you need me to do? Veltar asked. Jake's grin was fierce and determined. First, we need to get out of this room. Then we need to have a little chat with the people running the research project. And after that, we're going to save the galaxy from itself. And if we fail, then at least we'll fail trying to do the right thing. That's more than most people can say. Veltar walked to the door and pressed his palm against the security scanner. The lock clicked open with a soft sound. He looked back at Jake one more time. I hope you know what you're doing. Admiral, so do I, Commander, so do I. The elevator that took Jake Morrison and Commander Veltar down to the research facility was not on any public map of Nexus 7. It required 2 security cards and a biometric scan to operate. The ride down took 3 minutes, which meant they were descending deep into the station's core. Jake stood calmly in the elevator car, his hands still bound by energy restraints. To anyone watching the security cameras, it would look like Commander Veltar was simply transferring a prisoner to a more secure location. The truth was much more dangerous. How do you know so much about this place? Veltar asked as the elevator descended. I've been planning this for 6 months, Jake replied. When you're supposed to be dead, you have a lot of time to do research. I know every corridor, every security checkpoint, every ventilation shaft in this facility. The elevator stopped with a soft chime. The doors opened to reveal a corridor that looked nothing like the rest of the station. The walls were made of black metal that seemed to absorb light. Advanced security scanners swept back and forth like mechanical eyes. The air hummed with the power of hidden energy weapons. 2 Kethver guards stood at attention near the elevator. Their uniforms were different from the regular station security. These were special forces, trained to kill without hesitation. Commander Veltar, one of the guards said with a respectful nod, we were not expecting you. I'm bringing the prisoner. For special questioning, Veltar replied smoothly. Dr. Harper requested to examine him personally. The guards looked at each other uncertainly. This was not standard procedure, but Commander Veltar was too high-ranking to question directly. Sir, we need to check with whom? Veltar interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect for 30 years. Are you telling me that I need permission to move a prisoner within my own jurisdiction? The guard stepped aside quickly. Of course not, sir. Please proceed. Jake and Veltar walked down the corridor, their footsteps echoing off the black walls. Jake counted the security cameras as they passed. 14 so far, all tracking their movement. He made mental notes of their positions for later use. Dr. Harper is the lead researcher? Jake asked quietly. Yes, she's a brilliant scientist, but she believes her work is for peaceful purposes. She has no idea what the real plan is. They reached a heavy door marked with warning signs in 6 different languages. Veltar pressed his palm to another scanner, and the door slid open with a mechanical hiss. The room beyond was filled with equipment that Jake recognized but wished he did. And single quotes to Dr. Lisa Harper looked up from her workstation as they entered. She was a human woman in her 40s with short gray hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her white lab coat was stained with various chemicals, and she looked like she had not slept in days. Commander Veltar, she said with surprise. I wasn't expecting visitors today. Dr. Harper, I'd like you to meet Jake Morrison. He's very interested in your work. Dr. Harper looked at Jake with curiosity. Mr. Morrison, I don't recognize the name. Are you from the Oversight Committee? Jake smiled his familiar friendly smile. Not exactly, Doctor. I'm more of a concerned citizen. Tell me, what do you think your quantum resonance matrix is going to be used for? The question caught Dr. Harper off guard. The matrix is a defensive weapon system. It's designed to disable enemy ships without causing permanent damage to the crews. Is that what they told you? Jake asked gently. Did they mention that the same technology can be used to destabilize the molecular bonds of organic matter across an entire planetary surface? Dr. Harper's face went pale. That's impossible. The matrix doesn't work that way. It's specifically designed to target mechanical systems. Jake looked around the laboratory. He saw equipment that could measure quantum fluctuations down to the subatomic level, computers that could calculate the resonance frequency of any known material, power generators that could channel enough energy to crack a moon in half. Doctor, have you ever actually tested your matrix on organic matter? Of course not. That would be completely against research protocols. But you could test it, couldn't you? If someone ordered you to? Dr. Harper looked confused and frightened. I suppose so, but why would anyone want to do that? Veltar stepped forward. Dr. Harper, I need you to access the classified files in your computer. The ones marked with Project Pandora authorization codes. I can't do that. Those files are above my clearance level. Use my authorization, Veltar said, handing her his command card. Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha. Dr. Harper took the card with trembling hands. She inserted it into her computer and entered the access codes. The screen flickered then, displayed files that made her gasp in horror. This can't be right, she whispered, reading the documents. These are targeting coordinates for inhabited worlds, and this is a complete genetic profile of human DNA. Jake watched her face as the truth sank in. They're planning to use your weapon against Earth, aren't they, Doctor? No, Dr. Harper said, shaking her head. This has to be a mistake. The project is for defense. They told me it was for defense. They lied to you, Jake said simply. Just like they lied to everyone else? The question is, what are you going to do about it? Dr. Harper stared at the screen, her face reflecting the glow of the terrible truth. The Matrix, if it's calibrated to human genetic markers, it would kill every person on Earth in a matter of hours. Not just kill, Jake corrected. Erase. There wouldn't be bodies left to bury. Your weapon would break down human tissue at the molecular level. It would be like we never existed. The laboratory fell silent except for the hum of equipment. Dr. Harper sat in her chair, staring at the evidence of the conspiracy she had unknowingly helped to create. Her life's work, twisted into an instrument of genocide. What do you want? From me? She finally asked. I want you to help us destroy it, Jake said. All of it, the weapon, the research, everything. That's impossible. The Matrix is connected to the station's main power grid. If we tried to overload it, we could destroy the entire station. How many people are on this station? About 3,000. Jake looked at Veltar. How many people live on Earth? 8 billion, Veltar replied quietly. Then we need to find a way to evacuate the station, Jake said. Because one way or another, that weapon is not leaving this facility. Dr. Harper stood up and walked to one of her machines. It was a complex device covered in displays and control panels. This is the main control unit for the quantum matrix. If I reverse the polarity and create a feedback loop, it would cause a cascade failure. What would that do? It would turn the weapon's power back on itself. The quantum field would collapse, creating a localized space-time distortion. The explosion would be... She paused, calculating. Visible from 3 star systems away. Can you do it? Yes, but it would take time. Maybe 20 minutes to reprogram the system, Jake nodded. Then we better get started. Commander, can you arrange for an evacuation? Veltar was already moving toward the communication panel. I'll trigger a general alert. Reactor malfunction or something similar. It will get people moving without causing panic. As Veltar began issuing evacuation orders, Jake helped Dr. Harper reprogram the quantum matrix. The work was complex and dangerous. One mistake could trigger the weapon prematurely, killing everyone on the station. "Why are you doing this?" Dr. Harper asked as she worked. "You could have just reported the conspiracy to the authorities." "What authorities?" Jake replied. "The conspiracy reaches to the highest levels of government. The only people we can trust are the ones in this room." The station's alarm system began wailing. Red lights flashed throughout the facility. Over the intercom, Veltar's voice announced a critical reactor failure and ordered all personnel to evacuate immediately. "How much time do we have?" Jake asked as Dr. Harper looked at her calculations. 15 minutes until the cascade becomes irreversible. 25 minutes until the explosion. And how long for the evacuation? At least 30 minutes for everyone to reach the escape pods. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then some of us aren't going to make it. Dr. Harper stopped working and looked at him. "You knew that from the beginning, didn't you?" "I've been dead for 3 years, Doctor. I'm not afraid of making it official." She returned to her work with renewed determination. "Then let's make sure those 8 billion people on Earth get to keep living." Outside the laboratory, the conspiracy was beginning to realize that something had gone wrong. Security teams were racing through the corridors trying to figure out why their secret weapon was powering down, but they were too late. Jake Morrison had planned this perfectly. The quantum matrix hummed as its power built toward the critical point. Soon there would be no stopping it. The weapon designed to destroy Earth would instead destroy itself, taking its creators with it. Jake Morrison smiled as he watched the countdown timer. He had kept his promise. Earth was safe. And sometimes that was all a dead hero could ask for. The countdown timer on Dr. Harper's screen showed 18 minutes until the quantum matrix would reach critical failure. Throughout Nexus 7, emergency sirens wailed as thousands of people rushed toward escape pods. The evacuation was proceeding faster than expected, but not fast enough. Jake Morrison stood at the laboratory's main window, watching the chaos in the corridors below. Security teams ran past, trying to understand why their secret facility was shutting down. Some carried weapons. Others shouted orders that no one seemed to follow. "Jake," Dr. Harper called from her workstation. "I need you to look at this." He walked over to her computer screen. Lines of code scrolled past faster than most people could read, but Jake's trained eye caught the important details. The quantum matrix was building power exactly as planned, but something else was happening. 2. The facility's automatic defenses are activating, Dr. Harper explained. The system thinks we're saboteurs. It's sealing all the exits and flooding the lower levels with security drones. Commander Veltar looked up from the communication panel, where he had been coordinating the evacuation. "How many people are still trapped down here?" "At least 200, Dr. Harper replied. "Maybe more. The security lockdown is preventing them from reaching the escape pods." Jake studied the defensive systems programming. It was sophisticated and ruthless. Anyone caught in the lower levels would be trapped when the quantum matrix exploded. The conspiracy had built their facility to be self-destroying if discovered. "Can you override the lockdown?" Jake asked. "Not from here. The security controls are on level 6-2 floors down, but the area will be crawling with defense drones by now." "Then that's where I'm going," Jake said simply. Veltar's ears flattened against his head. "That's suicide. You'd never make it past the drones alone." "I won't be alone," Jake replied, looking at the Kethver commander. "You're coming with me. What about the quantum matrix?" "Someone needs to finish the sabotage." Dr. Harper raised her hand. "I can handle that. The programming is almost complete. But once I start the final sequence, there's no stopping it. You'll have maybe 10 minutes to override the lockdown and get everyone out." Jake nodded. 10 minutes should be enough." "For what?" Veltar asked. to prove that humans and HFY make a pretty good team when we work together. The journey to level 6 was like traveling through a war zone. The corridors were filled with floating security drones that fired energy beams at anything that moved. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls. The air smelled of ozone and burning metal. Jake and Veltar moved carefully, using their different skills to avoid the drones. Jake's military training helped him predict patrol patterns and find cover. Veltar's natural stealth and quick reflexes kept them hidden when concealment failed. "Why are you doing this?" Veltar asked as they crouched behind an overturned table, waiting for a drone patrol to pass. "What do you mean? You could have escaped with the first evacuation wave. You could be safe by now. Why risk your life for people you don't even know?" Jake thought about the question for a moment. "When I was a kid, my father told me something I never forgot. He said that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching. It's what they do when no one will ever know. But people will know about this. You'll be remembered as a hero again. Will I?" Jake asked with a sad smile. "The official story will be that a reactor malfunction destroyed the station. The conspiracy, the weapon, everything that happened here will be classified forever. As far as history is concerned, Jake Morrison will stay dead." They reached the security control room after 20 minutes of careful movement. The heavy door was locked and guarded by 4 armed drones. Jake studied the situation and made quick calculations. "I can disable the drones," he whispered to Veltar. "But I'll need about 30 seconds to override the door locks. Can you keep them busy that long?" Veltar's eyes gleamed in the emergency lighting. "HFY are natural hunters, Jake. 30 seconds is plenty of time." What followed was a display of alien grace and human ingenuity working in perfect harmony. Veltar moved like liquid shadow, his claws and reflexes turning him into a living weapon. He leaped and dodged with impossible speed, drawing the drone's fire while Jake worked on the door controls. The security room contained banks of computers and monitoring screens. Jake's fingers flew over the keyboard as he accessed the lockdown protocols. Behind him, he could hear the sound of Veltar's battle with the drones. Energy beams sizzled past the doorway. "How much longer?" Veltar called out between shots. "Almost there," Jake replied. "Just need to bypass the final security layer." The timer on his wrist showed 6 minutes until the quantum matrix explosion. Throughout the station, trapped personnel waited for the doors to open. Some had given up hope. Others prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Jake found the master override code buried deep in the system's programming. It required a command authorization that only the highest-ranking officials possessed. Fortunately, Jake Morrison had been one of those officials before his supposed death. "Got it," Jake announced as he entered his Admiral's code. Throughout the facility, sealed doors began opening with mechanical hisses. Emergency pathways activated, guiding trapped people toward escape routes. Veltar finished destroying the last security drone and rushed into the control room. "The evacuation routes are clear. Everyone should be able to reach the escape pods now." "Everyone except us?" Jake pointed out. "We're too far from the nearest pod bay. We'll never make it in time." The HFY commander looked at the evacuation map on the nearest screen. Jake was right. They were trapped in the deepest part of the facility with only 4 minutes until the explosion. "There might be one way," Veltar said slowly. "The maintenance shaft that leads to the external docking bay. It's not designed for evacuation, but it's our only chance." They ran through corridors that were now empty of both people and drones. The evacuation had succeeded. Thousands of lives had been saved. The only question was whether the 2 beings who had made it possible would survive to see the result. The maintenance shaft was narrow and filled with pipes and cables. Jake and Veltar crawled through it as fast as they could, racing against time and probability. Behind them, the quantum matrix continued building toward its explosive conclusion. They emerged into the docking bay with 90 seconds to spare. A single escape pod waited at the far end of the bay, its engines already warming up. But between them and safety stood a figure that made Jake's blood run cold. "General," Thaxara was a high-ranking Kethver officer who had always opposed human expansion. His uniform was covered with medals and his eyes burned with fanatic hatred. He held an energy weapon pointed directly at Jake's chest. "Admiral Morrison," the general said with cold satisfaction. "The human who destroyed everything we worked for." "General," Jake replied calmly, "I was wondering when you'd show up. Did you really think you could stop us? There are other facilities, other weapons. Earth will burn and the galaxy will be safe from human contamination." "Maybe," Jake admitted, "but not today. And not with this weapon." The timer on Jake's wrist showed 30 seconds until explosion. The general's finger tightened on his weapon's trigger. Veltar tensed, ready to leap. "You're all going to die here," General Thaxara snarled, "and I'm going to watch." "Actually," Jake said with his familiar grin, "you're going to watch us leave." He pressed a button on his wrist device. Throughout the facility, every remaining security drone suddenly activated and converged on the docking bay. Jake had programmed them to eliminate any threats to the evacuation. And General Thaxara was definitely a threat. The fanatic general found himself surrounded by his own security system. As the drones closed in, Jake and Veltar sprinted for the escape pod. They launched with seconds to spare, their small craft racing away from the station just as the quantum matrix reached critical mass. The explosion that followed was indeed visible from 3 star systems away. Where Nexus 7 had once orbited, only empty space remained. The conspiracy's ultimate weapon had destroyed itself and all evidence of the plot against Earth. 2 hours later, Jake Morrison and Commander Veltar floated in their escape pod, waiting for rescue ships to arrive. Around them, other pods carried the survivors of the station. Nearly everyone had made it out alive. "What happens now?" Veltar asked. "Now you file a report about a tragic reactor accident," Jake replied. "The conspiracy will regroup eventually, but it will take them years to build another weapon. And next time, Earth will be ready. And you?" Jake smiled and pulled out another book from his jacket. "I go back to being dead. It's a good job with excellent benefits." 6 months later, cargo ships throughout the galaxy reported sightings of a modified freighter that flew too fast and ignored too many regulations. The pilot was described as a middle-aged human who smiled too much and read science books. The Kethver patrol ships stopped chasing these reports after a while. After all, some humans were worth the trouble they caused. And sometimes the galaxy needed someone willing to be reckless enough to do what was right. Commander Veltar kept the secret, as he had promised. But sometimes when young officers asked him about dealing with difficult humans, he would smile and tell them a simple truth.